Let's break down the wide receivers for Syracuse football next season.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are breaking down the wide receiver group for Syracuse football in 2024. We're going to talk about the transfers coming in, the new recruits, who's coming back for Syracuse football, and a brief comparison to last season. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so let's start off with the newbies, the transfer wide receivers that are in, and then we'll get into a little bit of the recruiting. I expect that all the transfer receivers that the Orange brought in this offseason are going to play a role for the team, unlike the recruits. I'll get to them too. So let's start off with Zeed Haynes, a 6'1" Georgia wide receiver transfer with 4 years of eligibility left. He had only one catch for 20 yards last season. He is a former 4-star recruit. He projects to be the main field stretcher on the team, and I can honestly see him being the wide receiver one. Not in terms of maybe targets, but in terms of biggest threat, because the guy I'm going to get to in a moment, I see he might have more targets due to him being more of a big body wide receiver. Zeed Haynes is a burner. We saw it in the spring game. That's why I called him one of the 10 best players on Syracuse football's roster right now. So Zeed Haynes, a Georgia wide receiver, former 4-star recruit, a solid pickup for Syracuse football next season, and he should do wonders with Kyle McCord under center. Next up, another transfer from Georgia, 6'2", 1 year of eligibility left, and that is Jackson Meeks. He has the best first name on the team, I would say, Jackson, and he spells it CK. That is the correct way to spell Jackson. So shout out to Jackson Meeks for having a great name. He only has 10 career catches, and he doesn't have any touchdowns. He did miss the spring game with a foot injury, but he should be okay by the time the season rolls along. He projects to be the wide receiver 1 or the wide receiver 2 on this team for next season. Him and Haynes, I think, perfectly complement each other, because when it comes to Jackson Meeks, you're thinking of him maybe more of an underneath to intermediate threat, someone who can be a good route runner for your team, reliable, good hands. Whereas with Zeed Haynes, not to say that he has bad hands or anything, or that he can't run routes, but you're expecting him to take the top off the defense. So Jackson Meeks is someone who can certainly work underneath for this team for next season. Like I said, wide receiver 1 or the wide receiver 2. I left him off of the 10 best players in Syracuse football right now, mainly because he didn't show too much while at Georgia, whereas with Zeed Haynes, he was a true freshman last season, so you can't really get a good gauge of him right away. It might be a more potential versus we know factor, but I think Jackson Meeks is going to have a big role for this team next season. Let's move on to the final transfer wide receiver that this team got, and that is Justus Ross-Simmons from Colorado State. He is 6'3", 3 stars overall. He was also a 3-star high school recruit. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. He had 45 catches for over 700 yards and 3 touchdowns last season, so pretty good numbers over at Colorado State. He was a Mountain West honorable mention. I can't see him beating out Jackson Meeks. I think Meeks has more upside than Justus Ross-Simmons, but he could be maybe a starting slot receiver, although he is a big body, so I don't know exactly how that would work. Regardless, he does provide this team really solid depth. That's why I really like the Justus Ross-Simmons pickup. So the 3 transfers for Syracuse football at the wide receiver position next season, Zeed Haynes, Jackson Meeks, and Justus Ross-Simmons. I can easily see all 3 of those guys being the day one starters for this team next season. Only Zeed Haynes played in the spring game. Jackson Meeks was hurt, and Justus Ross-Simmons hadn't yet transferred over. So very interesting. I can't wait to see him in camp and obviously day one against Ohio. Moving on now to the recruits. Syracuse got 4 wide receiver recruits in their 2024 class. Let's start off with Teron Hale. He is 6 foot, 175 pounds. He is a 3-star from Millville, New Jersey. He ran track and field in high school, and so he could be a future speedster. You never quite know. Just a quick disclaimer, though, with recruits before I keep going with them. This isn't a bad thing. I don't see many of them, or maybe even any of them, having a substantial role on the team next season. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that they're not good football players, but I suspect that a lot of these guys will take a redshirt year because I don't really see how they get on the field with how improved I think this wide receiver group is, which is a tease to later on in the show. But anyways, that's Teron Hale, 6 foot, 175 pound, 3-star receiver from Millville, New Jersey. Let's go to Emmanuel Ross. He was the highest ranked wide receiver of the 4 I'm going to mention. He is 6'2", 190 pounds, a 4-star composite, and he is from Red Bank, New Jersey. He originally committed to Stanford, but he decommitted and then signed with the Orange. So go us, right? He projects to be a future big body receiver on this team. He also did run track and field, so he does have speed, but a lot of these guys coming from high school, they got a lot of speed. There's a reason why they are Division I scholarship players. They all have speed, but he did run track and field, nevertheless. Big body receiver, a red zone threat for this team down the road. He's probably not as good as Jackson Meeks, Justus Ross-Simmons, or Zeed Haynes, or any of the other guys that I'm going to mention. So Emmanuel Ross, it might take a little bit of time for him to get on the field, but when he does, he should be pretty good for this team in maybe 2025, 2026. You get the idea, right? Next up, we got Jalen Hornsby, a 6'2", 195 pound, 3-star from Atco, New Jersey. Another decommit. He was originally at Texas A&M before committing to Syracuse. So another guy, 6'2", close to 200 pounds, could be a big body receiver for this team down the road. And finally, this is the one guy here that I'm going to mention that I think actually has legitimate potential to see the field next season. Not because he is the highest ranked of these guys. Malachi James. I had a subscriber recently comment about him, so I'm mentioning him here now. He is 5'11", 200 pounds, a 3-star from Willingboro, New Jersey. He ran the 100-meter in track in 10.54 seconds. You're probably asking yourself, what does that even mean? Is that a good time? If I were to translate that or convert that to a 40-yard dash, then Malachi James's 40-yard dash at, 18 years old is a 4.39. This guy is a burner. I mentioned how some of the other guys did track and field. No. This guy is a burner. Legitimate track speed here. 4.39 coming out of high school is highly, highly impressive. 4.39 is really good if you're going to the NFL. So I could see Malachi James getting on the field, not necessarily as a wide receiver, but as a potential return man because of how speedy and how much of a threat he can be. Now, they do have Trabor Pena. It's a little bit of a tease to next segment. They do have Trabor Pena coming back, but if anything, knock on wood, were to happen at Trabor Pena, then Malachi James, I think, could be perfectly suited to be a return man for this team next season. So the 4 recruits for Syracuse football at the wide receiver position for next season, Teron Hale, Emmanuel Ross, Jalen Hornsby, and Malachi James. Only Malachi James I can really see getting on the field for next season, but not even as a wide receiver, as a return man, as I just said. So that is it for the transfers and recruits for the Syracuse Football 2024 wide receivers. Now coming up, we're going to talk about who is back at the wide receiver position for this team next season. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn is a tool that I use all the time to find the latest job opportunities. But LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, they might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the streaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we're going over the wide receiver group for Syracuse football in 2024. We just talked about the transfers and the recruits coming into this team, and now we're going to talk about the holdovers from last season. And let's kick things off with the person that I just teased about, which is Trabor Pena, 6-foot wide receiver entering his 5th year at Syracuse. This is his last year of eligibility. He only played in 1 game last season. That was due to injury, and that was the Army game. He has 25 career catches and 1 receiving touchdown. It came in the 4th quarter in a loss to Clemson in 2021. If you recall, the Orange were down 17-7 in that game midway through the 4th, and then Trabor Pena had a long touchdown, got him back in the game, but the Orange could not pull off the upset and beat Clemson. They've had a number of close games against Clemson over the years. Obviously, they beat them. They always seem to keep it close with that team. Trabor Pena got that touchdown, but unfortunately, it was not enough to upset them that time. He projects, I know I mentioned Malachi James as a possible return man for this team next season, but Trabor Pena, assuming he's healthy, is the incumbent. He projects to be the starting returner for next season. He performed really well in the spring game at wide receiver, so perhaps he could be in the slot. I didn't see it coming. Trabor Pena hasn't really been much of, how do I say this nicely? He's been mostly just a return man for Syracuse over the years. So the fact that he really popped at the spring game was kind of surprising. So maybe he is the team's 3rd receiver for next season. Maybe he is. So Trabor Pena is a holdover from last year coming into this year, but at very least, he will probably be the starting return man for next season. Next up, we got Darrell Gill, 6'3", true freshman last year. He caught 7 passes for 60 yards, and he had 1 touchdown in that game in his first game against Colgate. Everyone seemed to get on the field against Colgate when they blew him out. He appeared in all 13 games and also made 12 kick returns for 262 yards. So he was used as a return man in part because Trabor Pena was not there. So they had to have someone be the return man. That was Darrell Gill. The reports have said that he has looked really good in training camp. But the thing is, this team is definitely deeper than it was last season at the wide receiver group. So where does he fit in, right? Does he beat out Jackson Meeks? Probably not. Zeed Haynes? Probably not. Justus Ross-Simmons? Probably not. So where does Darrell Gill fit into the picture here? It's not to be discouraging to him, but I just don't know what his role is for next season. At the very least, he seems like if he can take another step in his development, he could be solid depth for this team because you do need that in college football. Especially just football in general. You need bodies. You need them. Players get hurt all the time. It happens. So if Darrell Gill can take that step in his development, not get too discouraged if he's not seeing the field a lot, then hey, maybe he'll get that opportunity and thrive. So Darrell Gill, a returner from last season. Next up, we got Umari Hatcher, a 6'3" redshirt sophomore last season. He caught a career-high 32 passes for nearly 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. Similar situation with Darrell Gill, projects to be a depth option for this team next season. He's got solid speed. Just, again, the guys that Fran Brown brought in, quite frankly, I think are better than the holdovers they have coming back. Good depth, though. Next up, Donovan Brown. Donovan Brown, kind of controversial. Not really controversial, but he's still on the roster. About a month ago, Fran Brown was asked about it. He wasn't at the spring game, and no one could really get an answer as to why he wasn't with the team. But Donovan Brown isn't with the team, but he's still on the roster. He was a 6'1" freshman last season. He caught 27 passes for 320 yards and a touchdown. If he's coming back, then he is certainly serviceable depth for this team next season, but I don't know. I'm always honest. I don't know. So for now, he's on the roster. I have him pegged as a depth option for this team next season. So the main takeaway here, I think, with these holdovers is Trabor Pena will have a role for next season, whether that's as a slot receiver or a return man. And then Darrell Gill, Hatcher, and Brown, maybe they see the field at times. But how many receivers are you going to have on the field? You can tell me this guy and this guy and this guy or this freshman or whatever. And my point being is that you only have 11 guys on the field, 5 of which are offensive linemen. You have Kyle McCord that makes it 6, and you're probably going to have a running back on the field that makes it 7. You have Aronde Gatson on the field basically at all times, so that's 8. So you can only have 3 receivers, and if you decide to play 2 tight ends, then you can only have 2 receivers on the field at any given time. That's why I'm saying a lot of these guys are not going to have substantial roles next season. I think Zeed Haynes will have a role. I think Jackson Meeks will have a role. I think you'll see Ross-Simmons get involved. But other than that, Trabor Pena as well. But other than that, a lot of these guys, they are depth pieces in case someone gets hurt, which, knock on wood, you just hope doesn't happen, but it's football, right? So those are the holdovers for Syracuse football's wide receiver group next season. Trabor Pena, Darrell Gill, Umari Hatcher, and Donovan Brown. Now coming up, I'm going to compare this year's receiver group to last year. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. And the Boston Celtics just took a 2-0 series lead on the Dallas Mavericks, and Boston now to win the NBA Finals minus 950 favorite. If you still believe in Dallas, well, their odds are at plus 640. I think it's Boston's year, though. I just don't see how Dallas is going to come back in this series. It has happened before where teams have blown 2-0 series leads. I don't see this year being that year. Boston looks like the far superior team. You think you want to bet Dallas? You want to bet Boston? All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Day now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we are going over the 2024 wide receivers for Syracuse football. We went over the transfers, the recruits coming in, and who's back for this team next season. And the overarching takeaway is there can only be so many wide receivers on the field at the same time. And so the guys that I can really see having substantial roles next season are the 3 transfers they brought in: Zeed Haynes, Jackson Meeks, Justus Ross-Simmons, and of course, Trabor Pena, who excelled at the spring game. I think he can maybe be the starting slot receiver or the return man. Actually, I think he's going to be the return man. But regardless, And then as far as the freshmen, the new recruits, I said Malachi James just because he's so fast. He might be a returner for next season. Now, let's talk about it compared to last year. Is this group better? Leave a comment below. Do you think the 2024 wide receivers are better than last season? Me personally, just going to be 100% honest with you all. This group is 150% better than last season. Let's go 150% better than last year. The top wideouts for last season were Damian Alford, Isaiah Jones, Donovan Brown. Those were the day one wideouts for this team. Those were the starters. Let me ask you this. Are any of those three beating out the three guys that they just brought in? Any of them? Probably not. None of those three are better than the three transfers that they brought in. Trevor Pena is, of course, back. None of those three are better. So I think this year is significantly better. It's projected to be, as I said, Zeed Haynes, Jackson Meeks, Justus Ross-Simmons. Guys like Umari Hatcher, Darrell Gill, Donovan Brown, as I just said. They're depth pieces now. Instead of having to be relied upon as, some cases, starting wide receivers, they are depth options. Of the top wideouts last season, did anyone truly scare you? If you were an opposing team, were you scared to play the Syracuse offense? Well, you were scared against Oronde Gadsden, but he got hurt. LaQuinn Allen's a solid running back, and he's a good pass catcher. And you do have to worry about Dan Villari because of how much of a Swiss Army knife he is. He can do a little bit of everything. But I can just tell you this. Nobody was scared of Damian Alford. None. Nobody's scared of Damian Alford. In the ACC, nobody cares. Donovan Brown, nope. Nobody's scared. Isaiah Jones, I don't want to knock these guys too much. It's just that they don't really put that fear in you that you really have to maybe put multiple guys. When I look at the team now, Zeed Haynes is a legitimate field-stretching wide receiver. We saw his potential in the spring game. He was lights out in there. He can legitimately take the top off a defense. We know he has the athleticism. He was a former 4-star recruit at Georgia. I know he wasn't great as a true freshman, but as a true freshman, I think he'd have a really solid year. Jackson Meeks, not too much of a history at Georgia. He did spend 4 years there, but still, he spent 4 years there. He knows what it takes to be a wide receiver in the SEC. He could translate that to the ACC. Justus Ross-Simmons, just very good in the Mountain West. So I think that this year is much better at the wide receiver position than last season. Last season, there just weren't many threats. I was scared of Oronde Gadsden if I'm an opposing defense. LaQuinn Allen's good. Dan Villari's good. Those guys aren't even wide receivers. But this year, they are significantly more improved. The guys that were relied upon as starters last year, if they're coming back, they're now depth pieces. Plain and simple. So that's what I got for this year's receiving group. Leave your thoughts below. What do you think of it? More football videos coming, breaking down more position groups on this team. Not sure what I'm going to do tomorrow, but it's going to be another football episode, barring some breaking news. So that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you know right away when I'm dropping the next podcast. As I said, more football content coming.